know that most of what you've seen, read, or heard about Billy the Kid is untrue? My name is Gale Cooper. I'm a medical doctor and forensic psychiatrist. My specialty is murder case consultation for the defense. For 20 years, I've used my expertise to uncover the real Billy the Kid. Researching over 40,000 pages of archival documents and books, I've written the revisionist history. It's shocking, it's liberating, and I've written books demolishing the hoaxes, hijacking the history. My talks will share with you what I've found. Cover-ups, misinformation, and fakery, to use Old West lingo, will bite the dust. This talk is about my authenticating a new Billy the Kid letter. It's from my book, Billy the Kid's Writings, Words, and Wit. For decades, a mysterious handwritten letter fragment was known to be in the vast collected papers of past New Mexico Territory Governor Lew Wallace. Those papers had been donated in the first half of the 20th century. They became the Lew Wallace Collection in the Indiana Historical Society in Indianapolis. The fragment is a two-sided single page. It is signed just Billy. It's spelled B-I-L-L-I-E, not B-I-L-L-Y. When I began to research Billy the Kid, I got its typed two-page copy. On top was the copyist's brief commentary. It was dated May 14th, 1947. I got it from the papers of early Old West researcher Herman Wisner. They're in the Rio Grande Historical Collections of New Mexico State University at Las Cruces. But Wisner had merely photocopied this unknown copyist's work. The commentary indicated that the copyist had seen the original fragment. It said, page torn from notebook about 8 by 9, ruled, black ink, 2 sides, pencil notation in different handwriting at top of sheet. Handwriting resembles, but is not identical, with letters signed Bonney. In parenthesis was 1880. So that copyist believed it was not a Billy the Kid letter and that its date was 1880. The Indiana Historical Society was ambivalent. The fragment was kept in the Lew Wallace Collection's archival box for 1880. Billy the Kid's known letters were kept in a special vault, and the 1880 date was just a guess by a past Indiana Historical Society archivist and included a question mark. The mystery deepens. Robert Mullen, an early Billy the Kid historian, had the same copy in his papers in the Midland, Texas Nita Stewart Haley Memorial Library, but he had scrawled on its top, important, Billy's letter. So disputed authorship kept the fragment in limbo. As a novice Billy the Kid researcher, I ignored the Billy letter fragment based on the copyist's note. But 11 years later, when analyzing Billy's letters for my book, Billy the Kid's Writings, Words, and Wit, I became intrigued by its content. I decided to check its handwriting myself. The facts arrived from the Indiana Historical Society. It took my breath away. It was obviously by Billy Bonney. Contrary to the copyist's opinion, its Spencerian penmanship perfectly matched Billy's handwriting in his March 1879 pardon bargain letters to Lew Wallace and to Justice of the Peace John Squire Wilson. But the archivist's 1880 dating misled the copyist. Billy's 1880 and 1881 letters were written when he was on the run or in jail. He had no desk to properly write Spencerian style, so the script was cramped. And the ragged left margin, called mistakenly by the copyist torn from a notebook, would ultimately assist in confirming the place and date of that letter's writing. But what about its signature? It was Billie, not Billy. My sleuthing began. As to the Billy signature, Billy Bonney used many names. By birth, he was Henry McCarty. As a stepson, he was Henry Antrim, and he invented William Henry Bonney in 1877 as an alias, and his other known signatures used Bonney and just WH, W, WM, or William itself. Intriguingly, Billy's name with an IE is in a diary entry by a Sally Chisholm. She was Cattle King John Chisholm's pretty niece. Amusingly, she kept a diary listing presents from her many suitors, including Billy. She called him Willie, as Willie. She wrote, Indian tobacco sack presented to me on the 13th of August, 1878, by William Bonney. 2 candy hearts given me by Willie Bonney on the 22nd of August. Also, Billy may have always spelled Billy with an IE. In his December 12, 1880 letter to Governor Lew Wallace, he cited a Billy Wilson. He spelled it Billie. So, Discovery 1 was that Billy the Kid spelled his name as Billie. Next came frustration. What if the fragment's missing front, page or pages, had accidentally gotten mixed in with other Lew Wallace collection papers? So I went to Indianapolis. For weeks I turned every one of its thousands of pages. The missing front was not there. On a long shot, I then went to Bloomington. There, Lew Wallace's literary papers are in the Indiana State University's Lilly Library. I turned every page of all his original manuscripts, including Ben-Hur, looking for the missing front. It was not there. I had to give up. So historical analysis of this Billy letter depended entirely on clues in it. Little did I anticipate that it held new insight into Billy's pardon negotiations, his thoughts on the Lincoln County War, and his possible secret allies. And I'm pleased to say that after my authentication, it is now in the vault with Billy Bonney's other letters. The fragment is in excellent condition. It measures 8 inches wide by 9 3/4 inches long. It has a ragged left side, which made the copyist guess it was torn from a notebook. Its other 3 edges are sharply cut. Its fancy, medium-weight paper is off-white. It has faint blue horizontal guidelines, leaving a top margin bigger on the back than the front. The handwriting, however, starts high on both sides, as if not wasting paper. On the front side's upper left corner is a small embouchure of a lady's head. The writing is dark brown, that's typical of aged oxidized iron gall ink, and the signature is merely Billie. For handwriting comparison, I'll show you an excerpt from known Billy letter and the Billy letter fragment. On screen is an excerpt from Billy's March 13th, 1879 pardon bargain letter to Lew Wallace and an excerpt from the Billy letter fragment. As you can see, Billy's uniquely modified Spencerian script is in both. I also compared penmanship of specific words in the fragment and in Billy's known letters. The words were J.J. Dolan, John Chisholm, Seven Rivers, and Wallace. They matched. I also compared the fragments yours respectfully closing to Billy's yours respect in his known letters. They matched. Here is the comparison of the Billy letter signature with Billy's writing of the Billie name for Billy Wilson in his December 12, 1880 letter to Lew Wallace. On screen is the name Billy Wilson from Billy's December 12, 1880 letter to Lew Wallace. Its Billie matches the fragment's Billy signature. Billy also had telltale grammatical errors in his known letters. He didn't capitalize sentences' starts. He capitalized words for emphasis. Here's the Billy letter fragment showing those same errors. On screen is the Billy letter fragment showing Billy's no capitalizations of sentences' starts and capitalizing words for emphasis. Billy had excellent grammar and a sophisticated vocabulary, but he wrongly used seen as the past tense of see instead of saw. He does that in his May 28, 1879 Dudley Court of Inquiry testimony about seeing those killed in the Lincoln County War battle. He said, "I seen 5 killed. I could not swear to who killed them. I seen some of them that fired." That seen-saw error appears twice in the Billy letter fragment. It appeared as, quote, "When I seen them last," and, quote, "I afterwards seen some of the cattle." Billy letter fragments embossed lady's head is also a clue. Luckily, the Indiana Historical Society has a superlative conservation department. One of its experts worked with me to compare the fragment to the few other lady's head stationery letters I had found when searching the Lew Wallace collection for the missing front. 2 were by Billy himself. The others were by people in Lincoln. The expert told me that because 19th century paper was handmade, each batch had unique pulp fiber patterns, like fingerprints, and paper was not only cut into single sheets, it was also cut as a double-sized sheet that was folded into what was called a folio, like a greeting card. The expert concluded that all the ladies' head stationery user sheets, including Billy's 2 known letters, were from the same batch as the fragment itself. What about the folio format? The fragment's torn left margin, which made the copyist mistakenly call it torn from a notebook, actually came from tearing apart a folded folio, leaving the ragged left margin, as if you tore a greeting card in half. As a bonus, one of the lady's head letters by a Lincoln user was still a folded folio. That left the possibility that the fragment's missing front could have been a whole folio. That meant 4 more pages. What a loss to history. Then came the lady's head embosser. From the 1850s through the 1880s, stationery was embellished on its upper left margin by a stamping machine. Merchants could buy a machine, like modern notary stamps, to decorate blank stationery. Here is the lady's head embosser on the Billy letter fragment. On screen is the lady's head embosser on the Billy letter fragment. Its stamping isn't sharp. That means it's a folio's second page. The first page was sharpest. Important for authenticating and dating the Billy letter fragments was my discovering that two of Billy Bonney's known signed letters, both dated March 20th, 1879, were on the same lady's head stationery. They were to Justice of the Peace John Squire Wilson and to Governor Lew Wallace for his pardon bargain. Furthermore, all the ladies' head stationery users wrote from Lincoln in just a 4-month time frame of March to June of 1879. Besides Billy, they were all anti-ring. They were Billy's jailer, Juan Patron, Justice of the Peace John Squire Wilson, who lent his home for the Billy Wallace meeting, George Taylor, the assistant to Billy's attorney, Ira Leonard, and Deputy Sheriff Robert M. Gilbert, who had been on ring murder John Tunstall's coroner's jury. But who was the embossed lady? Did she have special meaning to the users? The most perfect lady's head embosser is on a letter of March 29, 1879, by Juan Patron to Governor Lew Wallace. Here she is. On screen is the crisp lady's head embosser on jailer Juan Patron's March 29, 1879, letter to Lew Wallace. She has a classical profile. She has a rod topped by a drooping cap. She's not recognizable to most modern viewers, but in Billy's day, she was obvious. Her cap is the giveaway. The lady's head is Lady Liberty, holding her liberty cap on a pole. Her image goes back to the Roman Empire. There, the conical Phrygian cap symbolized freedom because liberated slaves wore it. That symbol of freedom was adopted in 18th century revolutionary France as Goddess Liberty. In 1775, a Jean-Michel Moreau painted her as a Roman with a Phrygian cap topping her war pike. By 1790 in France, that cap was called the Liberty Cap. The Lady Liberty symbol also came to the United States by the late 18th century. It was used on coins and other public venues through the 19th century. Mostly in profile, she wore the Liberty Cap or held it on a pike, like in revolutionary France. Lady Liberty on the Billy letter fragment is that revolutionary image, and its users were indeed fighting for liberty from the Santa Fe ring. Then we come to the Billy letter fragment's contents. It adds to the authentication by showing special knowledge that only Billy would have. As to its recipient, it appears to be a follow-up to Billy's interview with Governor Lew Wallace on March 23, 1879. He was then in their pardon bargains sham jailing in Juan Patron's house. Referenced were Lincoln County War incidents. There is the 1878 regulator killing in March of Frank Baker. There is the April killing of Andrew Buckshot Roberts. It was one of the indictments for which Billy sought pardon. There is July's house arson and killing of Alexander McSween. The fragment also has the phrase, quote, places I mentioned. That implies adding to Billy's prior Wallace interview. As such, the fragment is unique among Billy Bonney's letters. It is less a pardon plea and more a sharing of Billy's insights. How frustrating to think that its missing front could have had Billy's full description of the Lincoln County War. Here's my commentary on the Billy letter fragment's content. On screen is the Billy letter fragment. It starts, quote, on the Pecos. That ends a sentence, but known is that on the Pecos were Lincoln County's participants in strife. There was Cattle King John Chisholm, who betrayed his alliance with John Tunstall by refusing to aid Alexander McSween in the Lincoln County War. Chisholm even broke his promise to pay the regulators' wages. On the Pecos were also ring-eyed Seven Rivers rustlers. They were the McSween side's murderous opponents in the Lincoln County War. Billy continues, all that I can remember are the so-called Dolan outfit, but they're all up here now. This shows Billy's special knowledge. By 1879, James Dolan and his henchmen lost the Pecos cow camp. They went bankrupt in 1878 from competition with John Tunstall. Intriguingly, Billy underlined Dolan, and Dolan was the Santa Fe ring boss in Lincoln County. Billy continues, and on the Rio Grande, this man, Chris Moten, I believe his name is, he drove a herd of 80 head 1 year ago, last December, in company with Frank Wheeler. That Chris Moten is possibly Dutch Chris, and the Rio Grande adds to Billy's description of a rustler gang in his interview with Lew Wallace on March 23, 1879. There he said, in the direction of the Rio Grande, Frank Wheeler and Dutch Chris are supposed to have used this trail, taking a bunch of cattle over. Billy continues, listing rustlers, stating, Frank Baker deceased, Jesse Evans, George Davis alias Tom Jones, Tom Hill, his name in Texas being Tom Chelson, also deceased. Baker is underlined. Baker's deceased is snide. He was actually killed by the regulators, including Billy, when escaping arrest for John Tunstall's murder. So Billy was listing ring outlaws relevant to the Lincoln County War, Jesse Evans's boys. They were Frank Baker, George Davis, and Tom Hill. All were involved in murdering Tunstall, and Jesse Evans was also involved in murdering attorney Houston Chapman. Billy also knew the obscure fact that Tom Hill was dead. He knew Hill from riding with Jesse Evans's gang in September of 1877. Unrelated to Lincoln County War issues, Hill had recently been shot dead in a stock theft gone wrong. Billy continues, they drove the cattle to the Indian reservation and sold them to John Riley and J.J. Dolan, and the cattle were turned in for beef for the Indians. This amazing statement shows Billy's insider knowledge of the outlaw dynamics of the Santa Fe ring. Key was that the ringites rustled cattle to meet beef contracts for the Mescalero Indian Reservation and for Fort Stanton. Tunstall was murdered because he was making legitimate cattle ranches to compete for those beef contracts. Billy continues, the Beckwith family made their boasts that they came to Seven Rivers a little over 4 years ago with one milch cow borrowed from John Chisholm. They had, when I was there a year ago, 1,600 head of cattle. This is Billy's joke. He calls rustling borrowing. So the Beckwith's big herd came from borrowing. In fact, like the other Seven Rivers boys, they stole from John Chisholm's giant herd of 80,000 cattle. Billy continues, the male members of the family are Henry Beckwith and John Beckwith. Robert Beckwith was killed the time McSween's house was burned. This is Billy's insider knowledge of the Lincoln County War battle. Robert Beckwith, underlined by Billy, was killed on July 19, 1878, in friendly fire. He was about to serve fake arrest warrants on Alexander McSween at his burning house. At that moment, Sheriff Pepin's ringite posse fired at McSween. They killed Beckwith, too. Billy continues, Charles, there's a blank, Robert Ollinger and Wallace Ollinger are of the same gang. Their cattle ranch is situated at Rock Corral, 12 miles below Seven Rivers on the Pecos. Billy was very clear about the Ollinger brothers, Robert and Wallace. Their rustling gang was the Ringite, Seven Rivers boys. Billy continues, Paxton and Pierce are still below them, 40 miles from Seven Rivers. There are four of them, Paxton, Pierce, Jim Raymond, and Buck Powell. They had, when I seen them last, about 1,000 head of cattle. Billy is reporting on another rustler gang, and he is making his seen-saw grammatical error. Billy continues, at Rock Arroyo, there is another ranch belonging to, there's a blank for the first name, Smith, who operated on the Penasco last year with the Jesse Evans gang. So Billy links this Smith to Jesse Evans. That means ring-related rustling. Billy continues, those and the places I mentioned. This use of mentioned implies a past conversation. It is likely Billy's Wallace interview on March 23, 1879, about outlawry. Billy continues that the mentioned things, quote, are all I know of this man. Chris Moten, at the time they stole those cattle, was in the employ of J.J. Dolan and Company. Billy links Chris Moten to James Dolan's mercantile business named J.J. Dolan and Company. Billy continues with insider information. He stated, I afterwards seen some of the cattle and the Rinconada Bonita on the reservation. Those were the men we were in search of when we went to the agency. This is Billy's eyewitness description of the regulators going to privately owned Blazer's Mill. It was within the Mescalero Indian Reservation. Billy calls it the agency because Indian agent Frederick Godfroy had his office in a building there. The regulators encountered Tunstall murder posseman Andrew Buckshot Roberts. He was at that building's post office. He was killed resisting arrest. Billy also confirmed that Chris Moten's rustled cattle ended up fulfilling James Dolan's beef contract through the house to the Mescalero Indian Reservation. Billy continues, the Beckwith family were tending to their own business when this war started, but G.W. Pepin told them that this was John Chisholm's war, and so they took a hand thinking they would lose their cattle in case that he, Chisholm, won the fight. This is again Billy's insider information. The Seven Rivers ranchers feared that Chisholm would take back his rustled cattle, and Ringite Sheriff George W. Pepin was recruiting anti-McSween fighters for the Lincoln County War. Note that Billy said, quote, he, Chisholm. He may have picked up that legalese when giving his deposition to investigator Frank Warner Angel on June 8, 1878, about John Tunstall's murder. Billy continues, this is all the information I can give you on this point. That clipped conclusion matches Billy's upcoming testimony in the Dudley Military Court of Inquiry. Billy said then, quote, when I escaped from the house, meaning McSween's burning house, 3 soldiers fired at me from the Tunstall store, outside corner of the store. That's all I know in regards to it. The fragment is signed, yours respectfully, Billy, as Billie. Can we date the Billy letter fragment? For clues, we have Billy's known dated letters on the Lady Liberty stationery, dated letters by others using it, and its content. As seen, the letter fragment Spencerian handwriting matches Billy's 3 signed pardon bargain letters in March of 1879. That points to writing in that month. And before Billy went into his sham jailing for the pardon bargain, he wrote his 2 Lady Liberty stationery letters on March 20th, 1879, after having been in Lady Liberty stationery user Squire Wilson's house 3 days earlier. That was when he met with Governor Wallace. He might have gotten the paper then. And after Billy's sham jailing on March 21st at Juan Patron's home, the Billy letter fragment was written on the 2nd folio page of a letter which Patron wrote to Lew Wallace on March 29th on that folio's first page. By June, the Lady Liberty paper ran out. Its users switched to different stationery. The Billy letter fragment's contents adds clues. It follows up Billy's March 23, 1879 interview with Wallace, and it said mentioned, referring to a prior conversation, and it adds to that interview. And with Wallace housed next door to Juan Patron's house, delivery was easy. So I dated the Billy letter fragment to the day after Wallace's interview with Billy at Patron's house. That made it March 24th, 1879. The fragment was in Wallace's collected papers. Apparently, when he left Lincoln in May of 1879, he took it, with Billy's other letters and his interview notes with Billy. So Wallace, living out of a suitcase in Lincoln, may have accidentally lost its front pages. Does the Billy letter fragment reveal more about the real Billy Bonney? As to the Billie spelling, we've seen that Billy used Willie as Willie when wooing Sally Chisholm. Was Billy now wooing Governor Wallace? In March of 1879, Wallace came to Lincoln after Houston Chapman's murder. He interviewed Lincolnites about outlawry. All believed he sought justice against the Santa Fe ring. So the Billy letter fragment adds to Billy's Wallace interview about general territorial outlawry. It adds Lincoln County war issues. Billy was wooing Wallace to the freedom fighter side, and Billy was on a lifelong search for a father figure. So his presenting himself as just Billy, like a child, indicates that Wallace was now chosen. That makes more cruel Wallace's betrayal of the pardon bargain, as we shall see in a later talk. But can more be extrapolated? All the Lady Liberty stationery users were anti-ring. Billy may have gotten that stationery for his 2 known March 20th, 1879 pardon bargain letters from Justice of the Peace Wilson, in whose house he met with Wallace on the 17th. And the Billy letter fragment used the back half of the folio split by Juan Patron for his own letter to Wallace on March 29th. Billy was there in his sham arrest. Obviously, Patron gave him the paper. That led me to a revisionist history conclusion. At least Wilson and Patron were helping their Lincoln County war hero Billy with his pardon quest. They gave good paper for impressive letters. Possibly they helped him strategize the bargain. They lent their homes to him, Wilson for his meeting with Wallace, Patron for his sham jailing. And don't forget that the month before, on February 18th, the ring assassinated the man who brought hope, attorney Houston Chapman. Billy was going to testify against the killers. That would make the Lady Liberty's stamp a secret declaration of freedom. And since the Lady Liberty paper was only in Lincoln, that's where Billy may have been hiding with his friends, not in San Patricio, as his March 20th letter to Lew Wallace had stated. And the limited supply of Lady Liberty paper grants one more leap. It may have come from ring murdered John Tunstall's Lincoln store. He may have embossed its Lady Liberty there, knowing full well who she was. So Tunstall's symbol of his fight against the ring may have lived grandly on. The Billy letter fragment is thus a tantalizing part of Billy's pardon bargaining with Governor Lew Wallace. It will also be discussed when I talk about my book, The Lost Pardon of Billy the Kid.